turned. Right?
Yeah. That was the North Carolina governor, and it's been confirmed. Yeah. The audio's been released, and the newspaper's confirmed. She was serious. She said, let's suspend elections. Obama's talked about how great it would be if it could be his way. And we already have this super Congress where 12 men and women create the spending bills. That's unconstitutional. The president has this veto, a council of 13. Europe's moving towards a, quote, economic union in their crisis. The whole move is towards dictatorial, undemocratic systems.
Again, I would call it Bonapartism, because fascism is still a step beyond, because fascism implies a real mass movement. But you look at Petraeus, that's Bonapartism for the United States. The 12 tyrants, as you say, the super committee or super Congress, the 12 tyrants, they're churning away in the background, planning to destroy your economic security, take away your economic rights, strip you, fillet you, all in the name of bigger and better bailouts for Wall Street. So Soros gets his money, Felix Rohatyn gets his money, the Koch brothers get theirs, and so on down the line. Just in terms of the protest against this, there is this Occupy Wall Street protest, and maybe that's worth a word or two. If you look at this, there are a lot of people there who are very well-meaning and who would be indispensable for profound social change. The problem is, this looks like a leaderless group, but it's not a leaderless group. You look at, there's a structure underneath it. And this, unfortunately, comes from the Service Employees International Union. It comes from ACORN. It comes from basically the orbit around the Soros group of foundations. And this is a counterinsurgency operation. The one thing you notice about the Occupy Wall Street, they have no demands. There's not one specific thing that they demand. They don't ask for anything. Rather, they're focused on their process, right? Their democratic assembly.
No, it's like Red Adair using dynamite to blow out a oil well that's on fire. They just want to dissipate it, set the precedent, and it's been proven Soros is involved. Other more libertarian groups have shown up, but really all they do is they have Warren Buffett and Soros calling for a middle class tax increase that they say is on the rich. They're actually offshore and exempt. They just want new taxes on the middle class to pay themselves in a new austerity bailout. So that's what I see, is this is a Soros branding of a movement to try to take control of the leadership of any movement that's going to expose Wall Street for the derivatives or all of their derivatives, bailout corporate welfare. There's no discussion of corporate welfare. It's all raise taxes.
But there are no demands. They don't raise any demands, or demands like abolish capitalism or freedom now or stuff like this. I propose some demands for them. If you look at these people who are actually at this demonstration, the big problem they all have is student loans. Right now, the younger people in the United States are groaning. They're getting crushed under $1 trillion of high-interest student loans. And this essentially it means that an entire generation of Americans is going to be wiped out. They can't create families, they can't get married, they can't buy homes, their credit rating is shot because they come out of college with $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 of student loans. The most obvious demand to make is an amnesty on student loans. Cancel those loans. When you have Greece, right? They say Greece can't pay. Exactly, they can't pay. The bankers will have to take a haircut. Yes, a haircut.
So it's time to default on those. Exactly.
Don't default, but just cancel them.
Well, let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question then. What is the point then of the Sorosian groups undoubtedly orchestrating this? And again, I'm not saying everybody there. It's a diverse group, but overall, certainly the media is giving voice to the people there, and they're not really. I mean, I've been watching them. Their main demand is tax middle-class people and pay it to Warren Buffett and George Soros and bailouts.
Yeah, if that, because generally it's this crazy stuff.
No, I've been watching it, Webster. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I look too.
Look, watch the mainstream media. It's George Soros every day saying, I'm exempt from taxes. Raise my taxes. Well, he's exempt because he helped write the loopholes to be offshore. I'm all for getting rid of that. The point is, the plan they push is an Obama tax increase, which we all know you put taxes on right now, the general public, it'll stall the economy further.
The question is, the goal of Soros and his panoply of foundations and other operations is to make that the Occupy Wall Street into the left wing of re-elect Obama. Because if you come in there with these generic, vague demands abolish capitalism, establish justice, freedom now, then Obama can say, yeah, of course, that's exactly what I'll
And by the way, they are saying that then basically, really, in my view, discredits an anti-corrupt Wall Street movement by making it communistic in the general public's eye. That's like in the 60s, they'd have FBI operatives dress up like hippies and break out windows and spit on troops.
For these people, I would propose a couple of tests. Are you in favor of the war in Libya or are you against it? Because if you're in favor of the Libyan war, you're an agent. The other thing is cancel the student loan debt. Amnesty. Carter had an amnesty for people left over from Vietnam, right? You were a draft resistor in the Vietnam era. Carter gave you an amnesty. Great. Obama, give an amnesty to these students on their student loan debt.
Yeah, because there are no jobs for them to come to, and they know this, and the college education is a complete fraud now for how much it costs.
In terms of taxes, the obvious tax is the Wall Street sales tax, the Tobin tax, a 1% tax on all Wall Street
But
turnover.
Instead, Wall Street has Herman Cain and all their other whores promoting a general new VAT or sales tax on us to pay them the money in bailouts.
It's a disaster. The value-added tax is an absolute disaster. These are regressive taxes. We don't need them. We need progressive taxes. But more than anything, more than taxes on any individual, tax Wall Street banks and financial institutions, because that's what is not taxed. Others can argue that they're taxed.
Yeah, that's the group that has a free hand to wreck the entire society. So listen, Webster, we're running out of time here. I've got to talk to you about the overall world financial crisis. That's where you're the real expert at. And then dovetail that with what is the leader of Iran, Ahmadinejad, what is he doing having the head of their Navy come out and say we're going to put ships off the U.S.? Sure, I get the tit for tat. There's U.S. and European ships all around them and right up in their face, in their grill, as the trendies would say today. But still, Iran has done well to not be provocative. Why would they want to give an entree into conflict?
Well, the great principle of international relations, of course, is reciprocity. And whatever you insist on doing to somebody else, eventually somebody else will do to you. So I would not recommend gestures of this kind. But on the other hand, you have to think about his domestic political audience and the idea to maybe knock these elites in the West a little bit off balance. Certainly, we see Chinese vessels now, warships in the Mediterranean, a couple of Iranian corvettes or frigates in the North Atlantic. Not going to make any military difference. It's largely symbolic, and I think largely for domestic consumption. So I don't think that's so outrageous.
So it's tough guy saber rattling because the Iranians are tired of the spy flights and the ships all around them. It's their military acting tough, a little bit of chest beating.
Yeah, I think today the announcement from Iran was that they've now got a cruise missile which has gone into mass production. So it's the other side of the coin is don't come into our nearby territorial waters or you're going to have trouble. But the big international crisis, of course, is we're now in the second wave of the Depression, right? 1929 was the first, 1931, the European banking crisis, the second, and then a U.S. banking panic in 1933 was the third. This time it's the Lehman Brothers crisis 3 years ago. That was the first wave. Now we're in the European banking panic. It's a banking panic. It's not a sovereign debt crisis or anything else. It's a crisis of the banks. And you can look at these banks, SocGen, Crédit Agricole, Barclays Bank, Deutsche Bank, and all the rest of them. These are the focus of the crisis. And what you have now is the inability of the European Commission, especially Barroso, the Portuguese politician coming from a fascist political background, the guy who gave the State of the European Union today. He wants Eurobonds. It's crazy. You can't bail out derivatives. There are too many derivatives. The European share of derivatives is at least $500 trillion of bankrupt kited derivatives.
Well, Webster, you've been, in closing, you've been talking about this for a decade. We're talking 1.5 quadrillion. And no matter how many bailouts there are in Europe, as you have rightfully said, it's never going to fix it. Now the IMF needs one. Now they want this new, quote, economic union, and they openly say, get rid of what's left of European sovereignty. I've heard them on Bloomberg say the democracy of Germany is bad because they don't want to go along with it. I mean, they're so naked now. So where do you see this going?
Well, until you change policies, the depression gets worse and worse. And of course, the policies that would change something would be one of the things I said before, the Wall Street sales tax, the Tobin tax. There are people in Europe who want to have a Tobin tax, and that would be a good step, except you got to make sure the money goes to the national treasuries to maintain your social safety net. The other thing is you want to get a recovery, you got to attack the Federal Reserve, and here's how you do it. You got to force Bernanke, either by law or by leaning on him, by political pressure. Bernanke, you've been giving 0% credit to banks, to credit card companies, to everybody who's a financial speculator.
In some case, less than zero, Webster.
Gets, 0% or less in terms of credit. What the Fed would have to do to get a recovery is announce that they're going to buy $1 trillion of bonds from American states at a 0% coupon and 100-year maturity. So
exactly, loan the fiat directly into the states and the people instead of to offshore constellations that loan it back at 30% interest.
Exactly, and this is now federal lending. We don't want to.
But what I don't like about the fake right-wingers is they'll say corporate welfare, let the banks have $10 trillion in bailout or whatever, but then they'll sit there and talk about a welfare mom all day. You know, my issue is I don't want dependency. I want to get folks off welfare. I mean, I want them off of it. But the bigger issue is how does Rush Limbaugh and all these guys promote this giant corporate largesse?
Well, they of course get the news is they get paid for their views. In other words, not just the ads on those programs, but also the actual content of what they say is bought and paid for by various reactionary interests. But the question with the Federal Reserve is it's got to be nationalized. There's a tremendous credit-creating power that belongs to the American people, and we want it, and we want to use it. So start with $1 trillion, buy these 0% bonds from states, 100-year maturity, to build what? To rebuild the interstate highway system, to rebuild the entire rail system, passenger freight, and
bridges, infrastructure that makes
electrical grid.
Instead, the globalist model. Instead, Webster, the globalist model is to slap toll roads on already taxpayer-paid for existing roads and call it free market. That's not free market. It's robbery.
Then you better factor in the expense of learning Chinese, because that's who's going to be giving you orders. So you got to rebuild your infrastructure. And again, public buildings, schools, hospitals, absolutely. Water projects, a huge question, especially in the arid areas of the West, right? So you wouldn't have such a drought in Texas if you had adequate irrigation facilities. So $1 trillion, and that can go either to states or to something like, the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey.
Well, it has been proven that infrastructure projects it's one of the only government things that actually does something, creates a chain reaction in wealth in the areas it's built.
Right, and the contracts go to the private sector. In other words, the federal government, the Fed, the nationalized Fed, or partly nationalized anyway, nationalized enough to give out $1 trillion for these things. The money goes to the states. The states then make sure that it goes into infrastructure and only infrastructure. Those are capital goods. So that means you're increasing your capital goods stock and you're increasing the productivity of labor. And that's how you get a multiplier. You can't start with consumer spending. You got to start with
buying more Chinese slave baubles isn't going to get us out of this mess. But Webster, here's my final point. Those that watch this and criticize you as a socialist or something, they don't understand from your
American system.
No. This is American system. But let me stop you. How can they then support 16, 25, whatever, the numbers are different, trillion in banker bailouts that went nowhere when infrastructure would actually go to the people in the building of it and then the use of it and then the maintaining of it? There's no debate. In closing, Vladimir Putin, before I even heard he got a facelift, boom, so you can see the facelift. He's coming back. Medvedev, his little minion, is agreeing with it. I always saw that as a fake ruse. You thought there was a split there. 1 minute on Vladimir Putin and what's happening in Russia.
I think the fact that Putin is coming back as president is one of the best things that's happened all year. And not only do we get Putin again